and 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode is brought to you by Drip Drop. Drip Drop Oral Rehydration Solution is an electrolyte powder that you mix with water. It was formulated by a doctor for quick absorption. I work in the desert, and it only takes a few hours in the heat, wearing body armor, carrying around a bunch of gear before I start feeling like crap and fall behind the curve in dehydration. Drip Drop keeps you in the fight so you can finish the mission and rehab for the next one. Go get you some at dripdrop.com or on Amazon, or ask your supply guy to find it for you.
And this is Jim. This episode is also brought to you by Dry Fire Mag. Ammo is getting hard to find these days, and you need to stay proficient by working your dry fire training. Dry Fire Mag solves the common and annoying problem in dry fire training of constantly having to rack the slide to reset the trigger. With this thing, all you do is clear your weapon, load the training magazine, and get to work. Check them out at dryfiremag.com. Hey, Mike. Remember that crazy shootout a couple years ago between that dude and the entire Dallas PD, and they ultimately cornered him and blew him up with like a bomb robot? What was the deal with that?
Yeah.
What happened there?
The Dallas attack, the targeted law enforcement attack against a bunch of Dallas police officers, that happened in 2016. And if you'll remember, law enforcement has gone through some growing pains over the past 5 to 10 years. So you had Ferguson circa 2015, I think it was. And you also had the Alton Sterling incident, the Fulano Castile incident. These were law enforcement shootings that caught a lot of flack. And so there were a lot of protests and a lot of just kind of anti-police sentiment, and the Black Lives Matter movement was picking up speed. And so in Dallas in 2016, there was a protest, like there were all over the country. There were lots of these protests. About 800 people showed up in the downtown area for this protest. There were about 100 police officers assigned to work this event for, crowd control and those sorts of things. And among that group was also 20 or 30 open carry activists, just some, gun dudes that like to show up to things that might get weird. And they've got their gear. They're wearing like tactical vests and gas masks and their fatigues and stuff.
So this may sound crazy to many reasonable people, that there's just dudes walking around with guns out and vests and gas masks. And 5 or 10 years ago, that probably would have been a lot more crazy. It's a lot more normal now. And it's also very regional, right? There's some parts of the country where that is a lot more normal, and some parts of the country that's a lot less normal. It's Texas. Even my my florist had a gun in Texas. But, quick editorial, without getting too political, you have a constitutional right to keep and bear arms. I'm a big believer in that. That's a big part of my worldview. But with rights comes some responsibility, and you have to understand how the presence of visibly armed, angry people changes an already tense situation and presents a lot of ambiguity and problems, frankly, for police. So that was the scene, right? Big protest, not a giant protest, not a riot, big protest.
It's actually like a march, like they were just marching down the street.
Which also is a constitutional right? You have the right to protest. You have the right to assemble. You have a lot of rights.
Maybe not block traffic, but yeah, I digress.
Agreed. But big protest, angry people, some of them armed, or some people on the scene armed. So that's our scene. What about the bad guy?
So actually, these open carry dudes wearing all their gear is not really that relevant to the story, except that, like Jim said, it kind of fuels a little bit of the fire, and it makes people edgy, and it attracts attention and those sorts of things. So it gives you an idea that protests like this are emotional, right? They're emotional for everybody. The people protesting have an agenda, a motive, a thing that they are being activists about. And there's also, especially in this context, the cops are a little on edge because this is largely a not happy with the police movement. And
they're here for you.
And there's all these dudes showing up that like have guns and stuff. And they're like, yeah, I've got the right to bear arms and to, revolt against my government and stuff in a sense. And so it's an emotional event, right? Well, where this is going is there's one dude, and I don't have any information to suggest that he was connected to that group or anything like that, but there was one
to any part of that group. Wasn't necessarily there as part of the BLM group, wasn't necessarily there as part of the active carry guys, just to be clear.
Right. Just a sole actor, right? A lone gunman. Shows up to the crowd and targets law enforcement in an attack that leaves 5 cops in Dallas killed. And one of them was actually like a transit authority guy. I think the rest were all Dallas PD guys.
I thought it was a total of 6. Do I have that wrong?
I believe the numbers that I have here are 5 officers killed, 9 injured, and 2 civilians were injured. Okay. If I have that wrong, then we'll try to correct that, but those are the stats that I have in front of me.
Cool.
The shooter, and we try not to make these guys famous, right? We try not to like sensationalize what they did or anything like that, but it can be insightful to know a little bit about their background and the type of person they were and things like that.
Fuck that guy. He's just another asshole.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so sometimes it's important that we keep the names straight, just because in many of these, it's like this was the Dallas shooting, or this was the Micah Johnson shooting, or this was the, to the people that might have known one of those officers, it's the one that so-and-so got killed. I mean, we try to keep the story straight. The names are kind of relevant in the sense that if you start Googling these people and learning about them, there are some insights that you can glean, and I think that's worthwhile. But his name, we don't really care about, but we're going to talk about it just so if you want to do that research, you can. And obviously we'll put some links in there you can follow and learn more as you go if you want to. But his name was Micah Johnson, and he was raised in Texas, so he was a local-ish guy as far as we can tell. Did okay in high school, not stellar. He had a below 2.0 GPA. He did some JROTC stuff, so kind of had an interest clearly in the military. He went to Richland College, which is a local college there in town that also has a campus right there in Dallas that was part of this incident. And that part is relevant because it's a facility that presumably he had maybe access to, but at least, if not access, certainly knowledge of.
Yeah, so that's noteworthy, right? As we go through this, I'm going to kind of point out indicators that we could maybe pick up on, especially if you catch enough of them. Maybe you start catching a trend or a pattern. And sometimes people give off lots of indicators, and sometimes they don't, right? So a big indicator typically that a defender looks for, if you're defending a location or an activity, is pre-attack surveillance. Is someone watching you and sketching you out and taking pictures and stuff, right? We have noticed over the years that rampage murderers tend to skip that step. They tend to hit places that they already know.
Yeah, and I got to clarify when I said something about access to the facility. He had to force his way into this building during this incident, but what I mean is that he's been able to, probably during business hours, walk through there, and as a student probably wouldn't attract much attention, like he was doing some sort of rehearsal or some sort of scout or surveillance. He's just another guy that was at the campus to do another thing on any given day. It wouldn't have drawn much attention, right? So,
and likely didn't need to,
right?
Because he likely was already familiar with it,
right? So, noteworthy for sure. He enlisted in the Army Reserve at some point, and he just an enlisted guy. Just did like a construction type of job, nothing super tactical or combat related per se. Obviously, every soldier's a soldier and stuff, so he had some training and some experience. One of his buddies that he went to high school with and was also a soldier with him remarked in some of the investigation stuff afterwards that, he didn't have a lot of proficiency. He wasn't super skilled. He wasn't a great shooter or anything like that. He was kind of klutzy, kind of goofy, and generally a nice guy, but mostly pretty quiet and not really that motivated about the whole Army thing. Along the road, as his Army career chugged along, he ends up getting discharged after a sexual harassment claim from another female soldier. And this is where, if you're looking for like warning signs and indicators, again, not necessarily a indicator that someone's going to be a mass killer, but certainly this sort of behavior is a little concerning, right? Where a female soldier feels the need to go and get a restraining order against him and report it up her chain of command, suggest that he needs mental health counseling, and that ultimately leads to his discharge.
Yeah, so a couple things should stand out there, right? Social disconnects, inability to keep and maintain a job, stalking behavior, and established mental health concerns. Now, any one of those, maybe not that big of a deal, but when you start stacking them up, you start to see that trend, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, is it an actionable trend? Is it something that you're going to be like, well, we got to lock this guy up forever. He's obviously going to be a mass killer. Well, no, but it might be something, maybe that's a guy you keep an eye on or you touch base with from time to time or something like that, right? But as far as I can tell, there's nothing about this guy so far that screams early intervention.
Yeah.
Right? Like nothing that I know about this story so far suggests that someone could have prevented this with information that they had, right? Hindsight's always 20/20. It's easy to say in the aftermath, but so he gets discharged from the military, and in his civilian world, civilian life, at some point, he attends some like private gun training, right? Like the kind of training anyone can go and get at the local range, probably.
Like a carbine course, right? You go shoot and move and, shoot behind a barrier and make it, have your GoPro watching you.
Yeah, and it looks cool on the grams. You get lots of hearts on the grams, which is probably the most important thing.
Very important.
So lots of courses like that out there. They're not bad courses. There's nothing wrong with those. But in the aftermath of this shooting, one of the neighbors reported to investigators that they saw him doing what looked like military drills or maneuvers in his backyard. And it was the sort of things maybe that either his experience in the Army or maybe this like carbine or self-defense shooting course or whatever, might have taught him. And this is where you start to see like, all right, maybe that is a little concerning. Like if your neighbor is doing what looks like
rehearsal.
Yeah, military style drill rehearsals or something like that. That's kind of like cause for concern. Now, can that person get arrested and go to jail and get locked up forever? No, but it might be enough to be like, well, that's kind of weird. Like, hey man, is everything, you good? You all right? You good? Want to talk to someone about it? So that's probably the only real clear indicator that we have as far as early intervention stuff. Now, what I do know, and this might be an aftermath thing, I don't know that anyone knew this ahead of time, is that in the aftermath, authorities said that he kept a journal that had a lot of combat tactics and that he had a little arsenal at his house. And some of that arsenal included some bomb making materials, like pipe bombs type of building materials. Now, I don't know if anyone knew that ahead of time. So in terms of early intervention, I don't know that anyone picked up on that and say like, yeah, I was wondering why he was, doing X.
Yeah, and
it's something that they learned in the investigation after the fact.
And I want to be clear here. I'm not saying when I point out these warnings and indicators that someone dropped the ball, right?
Right.
I'm trying to highlight for you, for the future, things that should stand out to you, right?
Because we know the outcome in this one.
Yeah. If you're visiting a friend's house and you see a bunch of PVC pipes and nails and funny looking chemicals, that should probably stand out to you. You should be like, hey, is everything okay? Can I get you a candy bar?
Here's the Snickers. Yeah. So again, I don't know if we can go down the path of early warning or early intervention with that, but it's just, after the fact, obviously stands out noteworthy. So that's the dude. That's what we know more or less about the dude. So here comes July 7th, 2016. This is when the shooting takes place. What we know is that Johnson parks his SUV on one of the streets that's shut down around 9 o'clock in the evening. It was 8:58 p.m. for those keeping track. And he parks his car kind of awkwardly, kind of blocking the road. He puts on his hazard lights. And
that's considerate of him.
Right, yeah. Very nice, very, And he puts on a tack vest, like a, body armor style vest. And it was later found out to actually have body armor in it. A lot of people sometimes wear these vests because they carry things, not because they actually protect them. But in his case, he actually was wearing armor. So that's important. That's noteworthy. And from his SUV, he kind of approached where the protest was occurring, and he opened fire with a rifle at police officers. And right at that outset of the attack, 3 police officers were killed. That's where this starts. He also injured several of the protesters themselves. It's believed that they were not the target. The law enforcement guys were the actual target, but some bystanders were injured in the process.
Was he using an AR-15, Mike?
It was not. It was an AK-74, and many of our listeners probably are more familiar with an AK-47. This is different. This is a more modern gun that came kind of in the aftermath of the M16, and it shoots a round very similar to a .223, which is also like a .556, right? The AK-74 shoots a 5.45 millimeter round. It's a little bit different cartridge.
But it looks and functions very much like an AK-47.
Yeah, side by side,
but
most
different.
people, including me, frankly, probably wouldn't notice the difference until I looked at the magazine or the chamber or the bullets themselves. It looks like an AK-47, but slightly different. Not that it matters in this case, really. So in that initial volley of fire where 3 officers get killed, there were 11 officers there who returned fire at Johnson. He then reacts to that and takes off, trying to get into the college campus close to his truck that he parked, or his SUV. There were 2 officers there inside that obviously got in his way, disrupted that, so he was able to, he kept moving along. And in the course of trying to flee to whatever his next, wherever he was headed, it's not real clear that he made it where he wanted to go, but he gets in another engagement. And this video is one of the kind of famous videos of the Dallas attack, but there's an engagement on the side of the road along a building that has these cement pillars. And so there's, kind of a walkway underneath an overhang, and there's these pillars that are holding up, essentially the side of the building, and these big concrete pillars. You can see this exchange of gunfire between Johnson and Officer Brent Thompson, and they're maneuvering on each other a little bit around these pillars. One of the people who was witnessing this from like a balcony was able to get cell phone footage of this, and it's probably it illustrates some of the biggest takeaways that we have from this event, is watching that phase of the fight. And obviously there'll be a link for it for you to watch. But there's a lot to cover in this. Now, like any time we do this sort of thing, the last thing that we're here to do is to criticize the actions of the cop and second guess him and Monday morning quarterback or anything like that. This cop was killed in the line of duty during this attack. So we're not throwing shade at him by any stretch. He was probably not trained for this, not prepared for this, and he was certainly outgunned in this part of the event. But it brings up a lot of important points that any police officer listening to this can take. And if you haven't watched that video and really kind of analyzed it, I think it's important. So the first fundamental one is, how do you use cover and concealment? We understand that cover is things that will offer some ballistic protection. It'll slow down or stop bullets, maybe not forever, at least temporarily, right? After a few hits, maybe you need to move, but it offers you some protection from those bullets, versus concealment, which is just things that obstruct you from view. And the common things that people talk about when we talk about cover and concealment is, like, if I'm in a house, drywall doesn't stop bullets, right? So like if someone starts shooting through the walls, I'm in danger there. So yeah, I'm out of view. They don't know exactly where I'm at. So that offers me something. It's not nothing, but I don't have a lot of protection there per se. If you're out in an open area and you are using a piece of cover and someone is shooting at you, you have to understand that whatever it is that they're shooting at is still going to take rounds. It's still going to probably blow off into pieces that are going to, potentially frag you. And a lot of police officers day to day are not wearing eye protection or anything like that. So where I'm going with this is, if you are using cover and concealment, you always want to have some standoff. and make sure that if whatever you're standing or hiding behind is going to taking rounds, that you're not going to get fragged by it. There's another important reason to have some standoff, though, to not be, crunched up right against a piece of cover. One important one is how much it obstructs your view. If you can exploit the angle a little bit by standing back and away from something, you could still be behind it, so the guy doesn't have an angle on you, but you can see more, right? And not only that, you can maneuver more because you don't have to go around something. You can just kind of sidestep left or right around it a little bit. So using cover and concealment, especially cover, you need a little bit of standoff, and that's important. As far as the visibility point goes, the important thing is to not get so sucked into that area that you feel relatively safe, that you lose visibility of what's going on in your environment, right? And in this case, what you see very clearly in the video is Johnson maneuvering on the officer. So at one point, the officer is standing on one side of the pillar and he's kind of hunkered down, waiting for him to pop back out. And Johnson comes around the other side and basically runs up right behind him and shoots him point blank range and kills him. You can't get too sucked into that feeling of protection, right?
It's human nature to want to do, right? It's human nature to want to suck up against a wall and trying to make yourself small.
Yeah.
Totally get it. But that is a hard-learned lesson.
Yeah.
And it's been learned over and over in combat for as long as there have been guns, at least.
Yeah. So again, not to sound super critical or anything, but you just, and I'll tell you, like, I've never been in a real gunfight like that. So I'm not going to tell you that I'm not prone to doing it either. But just as a point of observation, if you get really sucked into that and you're looking down range thinking that guy's going to pop out somewhere, you need to be sure he's not going to pop out behind you or on the other side or above you or something like that. It's just don't give up that situational awareness because you feel safe, right? That brings me to one of my next big points, which is generally counter ambush tactics. And we've done episodes that we've talked about this. We did one on the UPS shooting back in January. It was episode 103, 106, something like that. There was a shooting in Florida where we talked a little bit about some gunfighting stuff. We've done a counter ambush episode, like a straight up counter ambush episode early on. And this is an area that we're careful when we talk about because we don't like getting into tactics too much, because we don't want the bad guys to listen to this and be educated about ways that they can hurt us, right? But I struggle with that a little bit as a guy that's running this, educational thing here when I talk about this, because here we have a bad guy who had those tactics and he was trained by the government and with openly available training on how to employ some of this stuff, and he used them against us. And so if the good guys don't learn it, then what is there to protect, right? Like, there's no point in protecting the tactics if the good guys don't know it either. So I struggle with that a little bit. And so we're going to talk about it, but just understand that we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah. So, we are Tactical Tangents, so we're going to talk about tactics. That's part of what we do here. And I agree, and this is a pet peeve of mine, about how do we balance security with education, right? This podcast is available to anyone who wants to listen to it. The Ukrainians can listen to it. The Russians can listen to it. The next mass murderer might be listening to it. We're sensitive to that. That said, Jesus, they already know this stuff already, so we better catch up, right? And this came up early in Iraq. U.S. Army soldiers were messaging each other on, like, I think back in the day it was MySpace. It might have been Facebook. And they were talking about, wear these sunglasses instead of these sunglasses because the Iraqis trust you more if you're wearing these sunglasses. And somebody commented like, wait, OPSEC, you can't be talking like that, operational details. And someone's like, well, Jesus, the Iraqis already know. So,
Yeah.
I understand the bad guys are watching these videos. They're watching what happened at Columbine. They're watching what happened at Parkland. They're taking notes. And so, gosh darn it, we'd better also be taking notes.
Yeah.
Right? Not all of these attackers are stupid. Not all of them are like 13. Some of them have actual training, and we've done episodes about that. We need to be tracking how often they're wearing armor. We need to be tracking how often they're shooting and maneuvering, and how often they're applying single-person tactics versus having a second, right?
Yeah.
And also, when we talk tactics, when Mike talks about tactics and I'm talking about tactics, we're not talking about specific organizational TTPs. We're not talking about tactics, techniques, and procedures that, Phoenix PD is going to employ. We're not talking about your playbook, right? We're talking about ideas and doctrine. And there's nothing here that you won't also pick up playing Call of Duty, which apparently everyone except for me on Earth plays. And one of the things about shooting and moving is just kind of coming back to the topic of maneuvering and cover, is how little I see the good guys practice it. It drives me nuts. And it varies, I'm sure, in law enforcement agency to agency. I'm sure some agencies really, really push it. I'm also sure some agencies really don't, and stand at the flat range and qualify and call it good and go back to eating their donuts, right?
Yeah. It's mostly they don't do much shooting beyond their qualifications to begin with.
Yep.
And two, when they do the fundamentals, because the fundamentals are really important, and because they're not ready for the next thing, the lowest common denominator spiel, which is horseshit.
Yep. And I'd love to pretend like, hey, when the chips are down, you'll know what to do. But it doesn't work that way. And we've recently seen a whole bunch of video, 77 minutes of video of people standing in the middle of a crisis instead of maneuvering in the middle of a crisis, right? This is tough. It's tough to practice. A lot of ranges don't allow it. There's risk involved in shooting and moving, especially going live fire. And this is an area where just a little force on force, like the paint marker sim training, can do wonders for you. And specifically this one scenario, I did a UTM, which is a type of paint marker round instructor training once. And the scenario was just a wall, like a VTAC barrier wall, right? So maybe 4 or 5 feet high, maybe 5 feet wide. You got one person on one side with a sim pistol, and you got one person on the other side with a sim pistol.
Best
Beep.
of luck to you.
Yeah, off you go. And it's specifically that's how you learn, is through pain, right?
Yep. This is Mike, and I just want to jump in real quick to announce our new partnership with Brink Drones. Brink has created life-saving capabilities in a drone that can break windows, fly into houses and confined spaces, and even crash into things and stay in the air with advanced pilot assistance that does not use GPS. Brink drones are built in the USA. It has night vision and IR that can function in blacked out and zero light conditions. It can flip itself back over, and it is a flying cell phone with two-way communication and a live video feed. It can even carry and drop off items for hostage negotiators with the payload feature. Brink has a really cool and compelling heritage that came to be after the 1 October mass shooting at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, and they are committed in their mission to leverage technology to save lives. And I can tell you firsthand that their drones will do just that by flying into places that are too dangerous to risk human lives. If you work in public safety, your agency needs to see what this drone can do. Go check out Brink Drones at brinkdrones.com, or feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to tell you all about them. Again, that's Brink, BRINC, drones.com. So, some ambush stuff, some counter ambush stuff. One of the first things you have to do is differentiate between a near ambush and a far ambush. And what those distances look like for you and how you define the specifics depend a lot on your environment, how much open space you're dealing with versus confined space, what kind of weapons you're employing, what kind of weapons the bad guys are employing. So I'm not going to settle the yardage or anything like that for you. But what I want you to philosophically wrap your head around is the principle that in a near ambush, your response should be to assault through it, right? To fight your way off the X or out of the kill box. And in a far ambush, that might be a scenario where you might want to maneuver and or tactically withdraw or retreat or whatever you want to call that. Because potentially you can reapproach that problem with a position of advantage. Because if you fell into someone's trap, you're not in a position of advantage. So this scenario was a near ambush. The guy was, within, I think, I don't know if I had to guess, 20, 30 yards at most, maneuvering around these pillars, and your response to that needs to be to assault that guy, right? To be aggressive, to get after it, and to shoot him before he shoots you. That's it. And I'm not saying that you can't use some good cover and concealment and stuff along the way, but the idea is you don't ever want to find yourself stagnant there and waiting to react to him. You want to make him react to you. That's the key in a near ambush. The other key as far as counter ambush stuff is that most of the tactics, quote unquote, that you'll learn about or read about are really set up for like small unit tactics. It's where you're not by yourself, you're in a group, or there's at least, 2 of you or 4 of you or something like that. And that makes it really tough. This is a toe-to-toe. I mean, these guys might have well just, marched out 10 paces and turned around, like they did in the Wild West back in the day, because it was just a toe-to-toe match, except one had a rifle and one had a pistol. So it's a shit sandwich. And really the only chance that you have of winning that is to just be aggressive and try to take initiative back. Another big one is, and kind of moving on from counter ambush stuff, but sort of related. It fits in with counter ambush, but we're going to open another can of worms here. Is the concept of directed fire? What we call it, in my circle, directed fire. What the military might call covering fire or suppressive fire. And what we're talking about is sending bullets in the direction of the bad guy to pin him down and to limit his movement so that we can maneuver on him, right? To fix his location in some sense.
Yeah, so this is based in a military maneuver principle, right? Of people who are getting shot at tend to freeze. They tend to duck and get their heads down and hide, right? Otherwise, if you stand there exposed, you're going to die. And so it is very common military doctrine that you shoot in his general direction while someone else moves in on him so they can get a aimed shot and take him down, right?
Yes, fire and maneuver.
So in a military context, that makes total sense. That's just what you do. Generally speaking, we do not want our police officers to be sending rounds randomly in a certain direction. That's bad, right? Police officers are responsible for their bullets. They're accountable for every round they fire, and every round they fire should be, generally speaking, directed at someone who meets the criteria for their use of force policy. But there's some asterisks, and we need to understand those asterisks, right? When the chips are down, you've got to be able to fix that guy.
Yep. So, and I mentioned, and I wasn't going to deep dive this part of it just because, like I said, in this scenario, the officer was by himself. But let's suppose that there was another officer running up on this in the midst of it. And now there's 2 of them. You can use something like cover suppressive or directed fire to make that guy react to you, to hunker down long enough for someone to get up, move again, and to fix on that guy. And so typically in those sort of tactics, fire and maneuver tactics, which we train for in groups, right? In those small unit things like we talked about, one element is going to be shooting to fix the guy, and the other one is going to maneuver, fire and maneuver elements. But where I'm going with this is the way that we train it is if I'm going to shoot in the direction of a guy, but I don't have a shot on him, but I'm trying to keep his head down so that we can maneuver, I'm going to make sure that I'm putting my bullets into something that is reasonably safe, right? I'm not just spraying rounds towards a crowd. But if I know, for example, he's behind a concrete pillar and that concrete pillar can stop bullets, I might put rounds into that pillar. If the guy's hiding behind a car, I might put rounds into the engine block or the axle of that car, because I know that at least I'm doing something that he's going to respond to. I'm like, okay, he's shooting at me, so I got to, react to that. And that might give me a moment of opportunity. Now, the debate is, do we train cops how to do that? So we train that on my SWAT team, and we've discussed training that to our department, to our line level cops, because more than likely they're the ones that deal with this sort of thing. An active killer sort of thing, or an ambush scenario like this, a directed and deliberate assault on law enforcement. that's going to be your frontline guys. And there's a liability component to that, right? Like if I train cops, hey, it's okay to go ahead and just send rounds in this general direction, are they going to go out and do it? And one of the points that was actually brought up to our guys when they suggested training this to like an in-service training to all of our cops in our department was, you remember when we first got tasers and like everyone started getting tased? Like it became the go-to, right? And so the worry is that like, well, if we teach people directed fire, suppressive fire, whatever you want to call it, they're going to suddenly start using it all the time. And our chief at the time, we don't work for him anymore, but at the time was adamantly against that and was like, no, you guys can do it. But essentially like the response was shrug. We'll just see what happens. If they do it, then they can justify it afterwards, but we're not going to teach them how to do it. Right. I have significant problems with that because now you're just leaving it to chance. The alternative is just like, well, let's just see what happens. You know, fuck it. Yeah, maybe they'll be all right.
Live. Yeah.
So that being said, so those are some training points that kind of relate to this attack at the pillars thing. What the last big one is, usually when we talk to cops about getting in this kind of fight, we're talking about active killer response. And this was an active shooter, right? It fits essentially the definition of an active shooter.
This was a rampage murderer, and he happened to be targeting cops.
Right. And the key in that is that it was a little bit different because this guy was going to fight it out, right? He doesn't fit the exact psychological profile of like active killer. Like the motive was a little clearer in this case, right? And he was making a deliberate assault on law enforcement and was committed to that task. So he wasn't like most active killers who often either self-inflict, give up, or run away when confronted. And so when we talk about being aggressive in responding to something like this, I encourage cops to kind of do a little an inventory, if you will, of not only your own ability to respond to something like this, but also your proficiency and your physical fitness and your, I hate using the word mindset, you know, but like it kind of applies in the sense of you don't get to pick the day. That's a common theme that we talk about, right? And so like
your
you've got
personal preparedness holistically, you know, across every aspect of your shooting proficiency and your situational awareness and your attitude and your general, you know, alert status. You don't have to run around in condition red or magenta or whatever all day long, but understand that there's a low probability, high severity fight waiting for you every shift.
Yeah, and you've got to train and prepare every day for that is the thing. Like you don't get to pick when it's going to happen, right? The other big one is in something like this, and it wasn't. This guy was determined. He put up a fight, and so he was definitely a little bit different than most of your active killer types in that sense. But if you think about the criminal elements who might plan a deliberate assault against law enforcement like this, you would have a much greater likelihood, I think, of having multiple attackers. And I would be a little wary, and this is why I say like I don't want to paint this with like an active killer. Yeah, he was an active shooter, but I don't want to paint him into that active shooter corner too much, because if you saw something like this again, it's not far-fetched that some criminal element is like, hey, we're going to go kill a bunch of cops today, and you can expect that there might be more than one. So, just something to think about. All right, so we have the attack at the pillars. That officer gets shot, and Johnson moves on. Around 9:15, so remember, this all started, he parked his car around 8:58, so right about 9 o'clock. So we're only about 17 minutes into this. About 9:15, he makes his way into the college campus building, and some officers are able to hear some glass breaking, and they start looking around for this dude because they've lost sight of him for a period of time. They find a blood trail, and they start working this blood trail into the building, and they're met with a volley of gunfire from like a hallway, as I understand it. At that point, when they start taking fire there, they don't actually have a shot on the guy. I don't think necessarily that they were expecting it. They were investigating this blood trail around a corner, and they take some fire, and the guy is gone. So they don't really have an opportunity to engage him. So as he works his way further into the building, he finds himself in like a mezzanine that faces a 7-Eleven, and he's working himself into a dead end. And there's some windows up there that he's able to see some cops by the 7-Eleven, and he fires out the window, breaks the window. You can hear him apparently yelling something about black supremacy and liberation and something like that, and he starts shooting at the cops. Another officer is killed in that volley of gunfire. So now we've got the 3 officers that were killed in that initial shooting at the protest, at the march. You had Brent Thompson, who was killed at the pillars, right in the walkway there on the sidewalk. And then now Sergeant Michael Smith, who was killed out by the 7-Eleven. So at this point, they know, okay, we generally know where this guy's at. He's up in the building. He's shot at officers from high ground. They're following this blood trail. They start containing him in the college campus. They seal off all the exit points. They evacuate everybody in the area, and they essentially have him trapped on the second floor near a library in this school. The officers that had gotten as close as they could to him were intermittently taking fire down the hallway from him, where they had him cornered. And it was from this point that SWAT resources started to move in and take that position. And now you have this transitions from like a patrol response into a SWAT barricade sort of scenario. Now, the amount of space from where the officers were and where he was shooting around the corner was about 30 feet, is down a hallway. And something like over 200 rounds were fired over the course of the standoff here. They tried to establish negotiations with him. They were able to communicate with him with hostage negotiators for several hours. Or I shouldn't say able to communicate. They were attempting to communicate, trying to establish a dialogue and get him to surrender. Nothing was working. And around 1:30 in the morning, at 1:28, the police chief decided that these were not going anywhere, and he made the decision to send the bomb robot in with explosives to end this and to kill the guy. They mounted their bomb robot, their EOD robot, with a pound of C4. They drove it over to where the guy was, and they detonated and killed him. It was later discovered when they finally moved up, made contact with the guy, that in addition to that AK-74 he was armed with, this is when they learned that he was wearing body armor. Something to consider. A lot of range drills do, they'll call them failure drills. 2 to the body, 1 to the head, 2 to the body, 1 to the head, and it sounds really cool. But what we lose value in teaching that is in trying to make people understand that, like, hey, if you're shooting somebody and it like doesn't seem like it's working, maybe it's because they're wearing armor. You need to shoot them in the head, right? Like, and so that might not happen in 2 shots, and then you take 1 to the head, 2 to the body, 1 to the head, 2 to, you might shoot them 3, 4, 5 times and realize, you know what? Now that's where you have to like cognitively realize maybe I need to shoot this guy in the face. Something to think about. So, but this is where they discovered he's wearing body armor. He had rifle plates in the armor, so it would stop rifle rounds as well. And he also had 2 other handguns with him in addition to that AK-74. So that is kind of the synopsis of this thing. I know we editorialized a little bit on the ambush stuff at the pillars. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways. I generally think that the response to the Dallas incident overall, like, from the grand scheme of things, went pretty well, frankly. I mean, 5 guys got killed, several other injured, and that's tragic and unfortunate, obviously. But, I mean, what can you do? This guy showed up to a crowded place with guns and opened fire. I mean, there's only so much, so much of that you can mitigate, right?
Against a sudden surprise attack,
yeah,
with an initiative advantage, this was a tough scenario. This is about as tough as scenarios get. Yeah.
So I actually think that we stopped and we talked a lot about the tactics at the pillars because I think that's the biggest takeaway. And again, that was one guy, unfortunately, who was outgunned. And frankly, I don't know anything about the officer. And again, not second guessing him, but I know what our training looks like at that level, at line level law enforcement. And he was probably not trained or prepared for that. So aside from that, I think the response was pretty good. Now, there's a couple things to talk about. During some of those negotiations with hostage negotiators, Johnson claimed that he set explosives all over downtown. None were ever found, but consider how that allegation, that claim, affects your response. Imagine you're in a hallway, however many yards away from this dude, and he's like, yeah, I set bombs in the bottom, like underneath you guys or behind you guys somewhere. And now you're like, well, shit. You don't want to completely discount that.
It's amazing how much you don't know in a scenario like this, right? Yeah. Fog and friction. He already literally ambushes you out front and then draws you into some place, right?
Yeah.
And you need to be thinking about that as you're chasing the rabbit. Wait a second. Why is this rabbit pulling me down this hole? Right?
Yes. You're getting channeled or funneled into an area. And I don't know at this point if anyone knew where his car was parked, but they might be running right past his car that could have been rigged with explosives. In a number of these active killer incidents over the years, you've seen attacks where they will target, there'll be a secondary attack that targets first responders. A lot of the Al-Qaeda literature out there that goes out and tries to inspire these attacks will actually suggest and recommend to do stuff like that. So it's entirely possible that they were walking themselves into a trap. You just, anticipate it, but it's hard to do much about. So
one thing on that is knowing when to go fast and when to go slow, right? And this is important because in a mass murder active shooter scenario, we're big on go, 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 go. And we've seen exactly what happens when you don't. But if you don't have active shooting and you don't have active killing and dying happening, maybe that's your chance to slow down and look around the corner before you go around the corner. You use the robot, you use the mirror, you use the drone, you use whatever you got in order to see in and then influence the situation instead of just charging into it.
Yeah. Yep. There was a big thing happening in law enforcement when this all went down, right? What we would call the Ferguson effect. And I mentioned this kind of in the beginning, we alluded to it, where in the aftermath of some of these police shootings that were heavily scrutinized, there was a big push, and that's what these protests largely kind of inspired and influenced and were working against, was, we will say, more reasonable or more controlled use of force in policing. Now, whether you could say that was, whether you think that was a solution to a problem that existed or not is irrelevant, because across the country, agencies were responding to these things and starting to, it was being reflected in their training and in their policy, right? There was a whole lot going on about like, oh, all these unarmed black men are getting shot by police, and the police are racist and they're overly aggressive and trigger happy and they have tempers and they're hot, whatever, right? And policies were affected, training was affected, and people were, quite frankly, police officers were discouraged in a lot of ways from doing any proactive law enforcement. And that's still going on, by the way. That hasn't ended. It's the pendulum has swung a little bit in both directions on that, but I want you to just think back to 2015 when that started, 2016 when that was picking up speed, and now this attack happens. This is all going on at the same time that we were having some very critical discussions about the militarization of law enforcement and whether or not cops should even have guns. I mean, a lot of people were making a case about stuff like that. And out of this attack, and there were some others like it, by the way, not to the scale, but there were some others like it. This attack illustrates this like need to have good tactics and gunfighting skills. And it's not just in the self-defense of law enforcement. We've seen lots of gunfights over the course of history in policing in the U.S. where we've needed gunfighting skills, right? And so where I'm going with that is there's this like balancing act, this dichotomy of, the militarization of police and gunfighting skills and also community relations and all of that stuff, right? So I don't know if I have much editorial on how this incident affected policing big picture. I just think the timing of it is interesting because...
Oh, I have a couple things. First off, this opened up the door to lethal drones in law enforcement. To my knowledge, this is the first time it was ever used, and it was used to great effect, and it ended it. So I think that set a precedent. I think this emphasizes the need for balance, right? And as far as the training that you get, yes, you need to be a good member of the community. Yes, you need to be very rational and reasonable in your use of force. And you need to take whatever reasonable steps you can to de-escalate a situation. Don't be looking to escalate the situation. On the other hand, when it is time to fight, you need to be so good at fighting that you're doing it well and carefully, and you're not creating collateral damage because you don't understand the concept of suppressive fire, right? And not training to that doesn't protect people. Training to that does. But you got to do it, 2 or 3 layers past just like, hey, here's a thing that we could do, right?
Yeah, and so, Jim, I actually had the use of the robot for deadly force as my next, as like its own point to get into that. So
not
you actually
on there. That's bullshit.
So you beat me to it, but it's perfect because I think if there is something specific that we can talk about in this, it's something like, well, if he was cornered back there, then why did they have to kill him? Why couldn't they just wait? And this is a common one that like, well, time is on our side and de-escalate and this and that. And, why go in and like assassinate? Like, why execute this guy? Right. And there was a lot of debate about that in the aftermath of this. And that's why I kind of made it its own point, because this also came up in the Dorner incident. I did a solo episode on the Christopher Dorner manhunt where similarly, they essentially set the cabin that he was in on fire, or they accepted the risk of fire and tried to burn him out, and he ends up killing himself inside. There's a lot of contention about that sort of thing, right? Like, we're supposed to de-escalate. We're supposed to slow things down. We're supposed to wait. We're supposed to do, however... I want you
Point of order,
Yeah.
to be fair.
Yeah.
You only get to kill so many cops before we're going to put you down, right?
Right. I want you to put yourself down that hallway from the dude who's already killed, 5 guys and
where
wounded
he may
others.
well have explosives, where he has told you he has explosives.
And you haven't been able to confirm or dispel that. And you've been dealing with this for however many hours. You're probably tired. You're probably hungry. You're probably stressed out. Your adrenaline is starting to, I'm sure it comes and goes, but like there is still, the risk has not gone away, right? And so I think that there's this distorted sense of, when we talk about how police officers should de-escalate, in the eyes of public safety or through the lens of public safety, the safest thing for the public, including the officers, we're citizens too, gosh darn it, but the safest thing for everyone is for that standoff to be over, right? Like, I get it. His life is important or whatever too, I guess. I mean, no, I don't agree with that at all. But, he's got a right to due process, and all that. And so if he was to walk out of that hallway with his hands in the air to surrender, then by all means, we'll give him his day in court, right? But that's not happening, and the risk was not decreasing. And so I don't see how there's really much dispute over whether or not lethal force is authorized. It's like, fuck around and find out, dude. Like, you want to give up or not? And if not, Like, here are the consequences. Like, you're gonna die, right? You've already killed a bunch of people. Others are bleeding, right? And you're still holed up in this area that we can't control you, and we don't know what you're up to. And you claim to have explosives. Like, I'm not taking my chances with that guy. Like,
no. And then context matters. And this is where the phrase like totality of the circumstances, it's not just a little blurb in police training. Like, there was an awful lot of circumstances here that made that okay.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. And so, but I had it as a separate bullet point that we addressed the using the robot for lethal force because it was a hot topic. And when I talk about the police response to this being generally good, the only real things that I can take out of it as far as learning points is 1, the counter ambush tactics at the pillars, and 2, that discussion on a deliberate, pre-planned, pre-authorized use of deadly force. And by the way, to shore that up a little bit, if you've decided that lethal force is justified, if you've decided that if you had a shot on that guy, you'd kill him, it doesn't matter that you used a robot with a bomb strapped to it. That part doesn't matter. The means doesn't matter. You can run him over with a car, you know, get your first knife kill, whatever. Like, if lethal force is appropriate, then lethal force is appropriate. So, those are the only real big ones. The rest of it is just a matter of trying to get that initiative back. And this was a tough one. There's really nothing they could do. So to recap, you had 4 Dallas police officers who were killed in this. Brent Thompson, the guy killed at the pillars, was actually a Dallas area rapid transport or rapid transit, a DART officer. So he was not a Dallas PD guy. So I might have misquoted that earlier, but Brent Thompson of DART. And then you had 4 police officers from Dallas PD that were killed. Several others were wounded. Some civilians were also wounded. And hopefully we do them justice by taking whatever lessons we can and teaching them to you guys. So I think that is basically all I got. Jim?
I want you to be ready for the low probability, high severity events. And you're not always going to be perfectly ready for them. That's what makes them the black swan, right? This was a black swan. One of the ways that you do get ready for them is intense shoot and move type training, tactical training. And you get past the fundamentals and lowest common denominator stuff, and you start getting into situations where the role players turn the tables on you, right? Turn the game sideways on you. I want you to see a situation go sideways a couple times in training before you see it in real life. And I think one of the ways that you can achieve that type of situation is with paint marking, force-on-force training, right? Whether it's simunition or UTM or something like that. Having a dynamic environment. And like I said, you can set it up in a very simple way. It doesn't have to be a big training complex. It could literally be a VTAC barrier wall,
a parking lot.
Yeah, like a range wall, a car. You put one Crown Vic in the middle of a parking lot, put one guy on one end of it, one guy on the other end. I'm going to kill you, right?
We've done that. That's fun.
Yeah. And learning will happen, right? And you mix it up a couple different ways. On a traffic stop in the police academy, you should have a scenario where someone walks up behind you on the traffic stop.
And your focus is forward. Yeah.
Or a car comes up behind you on the traffic stop. I want you to see that in training before you see it in real life. I think that's my big thing that I want to hit. I've always been impressed by the stuff I've seen from Dallas PD as far as their public engagement goes. And I feel personally like they did the best they could in an incredibly crappy situation.
Yeah, 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
I want to hit on the highlights that we talked about in the counter ambush thing so that you leave with that. One is use good cover and concealment. Don't get too sucked into it. Have some standoffs so that not only you can maneuver, but remember that stuff's going to frag when it starts taking rounds. And make sure that you're not hunkering down there too long, getting overcommitted to staying in one place and giving him the opportunity to move on you. You want to be aggressive. If we're calling that a near ambush, you want to assault through it, right? And the other big one in that is going to Jim's point about force-on-force stuff. I love force-on-force simunition, UTM, marking cartridge. I love doing that kind of work, but understand there are significant limitations. A lot of times we do sims training and someone gets handed a magazine and it's got like 6 rounds in it. It's not representative of what you would have in real life. And the other big one is you shoot at things with marking cartridges that won't stop bullets, but it does stop those. And so it can give you a false sense of security if you're standing behind an object, part of a car that will not stop around, and you think like, I'm good here because I didn't get hit with a sim round. Well, no, you're really not good though, is the thing. So just be careful there's some gotchas in there is kind of what I would say, is just make sure that you're looking at that critically. And the final one is Jim mentioned that, you put 2 guys on either side of a police car and have them go at it and learning will occur. That's true. Learning will occur, but I would encourage you to take that a step beyond success and failure.
King of the Crown Vic. You win, you lose.
Because
you go.
Because inevitably what happens is someone goes, it ends up being something like, oh, I had a malfunction of my gun, I couldn't clear it in time, or I had I ran out of rounds, or it's like, yeah, but there's still probably other tactical things, like little decisions that you made along the way that you might be able to refine. So I encourage you to record it, like video record it, and to really go back and analyze it, debrief it, and pick it apart beyond just, okay, yeah, so someone got the final say, right? Like someone came out of it on top, but there's a lot along the way that you could probably learn if you really deep dive that and review it. So I would encourage you to do that. So,
oh yeah.
All right. Anything else, Jim?
That's all I got. Be safe out there.
All right, guys, that's all we got for tonight. This episode is brought to you by Ride-On Optics. Ride-On is bringing you high-quality glass at a great value. I use and trust their scopes, binoculars, and red dot sights, and you can too with their unconditional lifetime warranty. If you ever have a problem with their gear, they will replace it, not repair it. Finish up your next build and keep a little extra cash on hand for ammo so you can actually go out and shoot that thing. Find your next optic at rideonoptics.com.
This episode is also brought to you by Manus X. We've talked a lot about the tactical fantasy on this podcast, and one of the quickest ways to break your tactical fantasies and actually improve your performance is by getting real feedback. One of the ways you can do that is with Manus X. You're not going to get better at shooting on your own. You need practice, data, and coaching. And you need to make the most of your ammo with good live and dry fire training. Manus is a family of training devices that tracks you while you train. It times and tracks everything you do in a drill and coaches you as you go. It is indispensable to taking your shooting to the next level. Go find them on manusx.com.
Don't forget that we put out new episodes on the 1st and the 15th of every month. If you like what we're doing, you can head over to Patreon, give us $1 for each new episode. That money's going to go back into bringing you good content. If you want to interact with us, you could find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at TacTangents. You can also email info@tacticaltangents.com. And one last thing, our Facebook discussion group. We've got a little group going on Facebook. If you go to the groups tab on our page, you can join it. We've got more followers on our page than we have in the group. So I know there's some of you out there following the Facebook page that are on Facebook that are not in the group. Lots of like-minded people in there. So come hang out with us. All right. That's all we got. Good talk.